Now I'm starting off today's list with the first person that came to my mind, the Great Rasputin. Close family friend of the last royal Russian family, he was originally introduced to them as a faith healer who could aid their only son, Alexei, who suffered from hemophilia. A self-described mystic and holy man, Rasputin was a figure of much debate amongst the royal court, with some describing him as a visionary and prophet, others as a charlatan and scam artist. Historians believe that his scandalous reputation and influence over the Romanovs only helped to discredit and overthrow the family. Having taken many pilgrimages to holy monasteries, he developed a reputation as a revered holy man, gaining a small circle of followers who believed in his miracles, and began leading private prayer meetings, much to the scorn and suspicion of villagers and priests. It was rumored that female followers were ceremonially washing him before each meeting, that the group sang strange songs, and even that they had joined a religious sect whose rituals were rumored to include self-flagellation and orgies. Word of Rasputin's activity and charisma began to spread in Siberia during the early 1900s, where he developed many friendships with high-ranking religious leaders, eventually leading to his introduction to the royal family. It's not certain when Rasputin first acted as Alexei's healer, with the earliest record on date being when he was summoned by Alexandra to pray for Alexei when he had an internal hemorrhage in the spring of 1907, with the young royal healing by the next morning. Due to his closeness with the family, Rasputin was allowed intimate access to the family, in situations that governesses to the young royals described as inappropriate. One governess in particular was released from her position simply for voicing her concerns about Rasputin being allowed around the young ones while they were clad in nothing but their nightgowns. Another one of the nursery governesses claimed in the spring of 1910 that she was seduced into sexual acts against her will by Rasputin, originally having been a devotee of the man, but was later disillusioned by him. The empress refused to believe her and said that everything Rasputin does is holy, later dismissing the governess. It was whispered in society that Rasputin had seduced not only the Tsarina, but also the 4 young grand duchesses. Rasputin had released passionate letters written to him by the Tsarina and the 4 grand duchesses throughout society. In 1916, a group of nobles led by Prince Felix Yusupov banded together, deciding to assassinate the holy man for his influence over the Tsarina and her family. It is said that the prince invited Rasputin to his place shortly after midnight, where he offered the man tea and cakes which had been laced with cyanide. Rasputin initially said no, but then began to eat the cakes, and to Felix's surprise, appeared unaffected by the poison. Then he asked for wine, which had also obviously been poisoned, drank 3 glasses, and still showed no signs of distress. So around 2:30 in the morning, Felix excused himself to go upstairs, where his fellow conspirators were waiting, and he grabbed a revolver and returned to the basement, telling Rasputin that he'd better look at the crucifix and say a prayer, referring to a crucifix in the room, then, nailed him once in the chest. Rasputin leapt up from the explosive and attacked Felix, who freed himself with some effort and fled upstairs. Rasputin followed Felix, where he was once again impaled with an explosive, and he collapsed into a snowbank. The group of men that wrapped his body in cloth drove it to the Petrovsky Bridge, and then, they all dropped it in the Malaya Nevka River. If you missed something there, it took a combination of cyanide, multiple rounds of explosives, and drowning before Rasputin met the end of time. There's no way that wasn't witchcraft. Okay, we're gonna move on before I see his face in my nightmares tonight. I already had one last night, I don't need more. So when it comes to history, some folks stand out for being a hero. Great virtue. Nobody today though. They're all going to stand out for their descent into darkness. Mary Bateman, a woman born in Assenbury, Yorkshire in 1768, was kind of that sort of person. Her life, detailed in The Extraordinary Life and Character of Mary Bateman, fitting title, reads like a macabre tale of deceit, poison, and a chilling transformation from a seemingly ordinary existence to a practitioner of dark arts. Raised on a farm, Mary transitioned from a farm girl to a servant in Thirsk when she reached her teens. Her life took an ominous turn when she was 20, and she moved to York and worked as a dressmaker. A year later, she found herself entangled in a burglary and subsequently fled to Leeds. Over the following years, Mary's occupation shifted from mantua maker to fortune teller and wise woman, gradually building her reputation in the shadows. In 1792, she married John Bateman, but her criminal inclinations persisted. Robberies, prison escapes, even accusations of working as an abortionist marked her darker exploits. Her criminal activities continued even after her marriage, as she roamed the streets of Leeds, posing as a charitable soul, collecting goods for fire victims, only to keep the gifts for herself. In a peculiar twist, Mary joined the followers of the prophetess Joanna Southcott in 1806. She orchestrated the infamous Prophet Hen of Leeds hoax, claiming that eggs laid by a hen bore apocalyptic messages. A penny was the price of admission to witness these so-called prophetic eggs. However, the truth behind the spectacle revealed Mary's deceitful hand. She had written on the eggs using ink and cunningly reinserted them into the hen. The year 1806 marked another dark chapter in Mary's life when she was approached by William and Rebecca Perigo. Claiming Rebecca was under a spell, Mary began feeding them poisoned pudding, leading to Rebecca's demise in 1808. William accused Mary of both poisoning his wife and defrauding them for charms and cures. Mary's trial in York in March of 1809 painted a picture of a cunning and malevolent woman. The jury swiftly found her guilty of fraud and Rebecca's, well, death. Facing execution, Mary attempted to evade, rope necklace by declaring pregnancy. A panel of matrons assessed her claim, but the jury of women found it false. So on March 20th, Mary met her end at the gallows alongside a couple of men. Oh, but her story does not end here. I wish it did. The after-death fate of Mary Bateman took a gruesome turn, so after her execution, her body was displayed at Leeds General Infirmary, charging visitors for the macabre spectacle. Dissected by William Hay, her remains became a commodity. Strips of her skin were turned into charms, and the tip of her tongue became a morbid keepsake. No thanks. Next up, we have Perna Hosmann. So her life at first glance was kind of unremarkable. Born in Bavaria between 1510 and 1527, she spent her days as a midwife, aiding her community. But of course, she couldn't be good, or else she wouldn't be here. The story took a dark turn in 1587 when she became one of the subjects of a ruthless witch trial in Germany. Now, the charges against her were nothing short of horrifying. Witchcraft, sorcery, even vampirism. Under punishment, she confessed to a bizarre tale involving a demon named Federlin, who appeared to her in the guise of a male co-worker. She claimed this demon led her to pledge allegiance to the devil, promising to free her from poverty. As she recounted in her confession, she had indulged in macabre rituals with Federlin and the devil himself, consuming the roasted flesh of young humans and drinking wine. She described frequent visits to the devil and her demon lover, often engaging in sexual encounters. You do what you do. Remarkably, she had the power to make her demon lover leave by simply invoking the name of Jesus. Hey, if it works, it works. Now, her confession also included acts of harm using a magical ointment that she had received from her demon lover. This ointment was used to end the lives of many, including the young and animals. Her list of alleged victims was extensive, including 41 young humans, 2 laboring mothers, and a variety of animals. The swift and unanimous decision of the authorities led to her conviction and a gruesome sentence. Before her execution by burning, she endured multiple branding ceremonies, and her right hand, the very hand she had used as a midwife, was severed. Finally, she met her end at the stake, and her ashes were discarded into a stream. Goodbye. Off you go. Time to travel over to Paris, France, where we meet La Voisin, also known as Katherine Des. Not a lot is known about her early life. She learned fortune telling when she was young and later married Antoine Montboisin, who was active as a jeweler and silk merchant with a shop at Pont-Marie in Paris. When her husband's trade business led to bankruptcy, La Voisin supported the family by practicing chiromancy and face reading. In addition to being a fortune teller, she was also active as a midwife, which developed into providing abortions. Her business as a fortune teller gradually developed into manufacturing and selling purported magical objects and potions, also arranging black masses and selling aphrodisiacs and poison to profit from her clients' wishes upon their future. She supported a family of 6, though, including her husband, her mother, and her offspring. She was known to have at least 6 lovers: the executioner André Guillaume, Monsieur Latour, Vicomte de Cousseran, the Comte de la Bâtie, the alchemist Blessis, the architect Fauché, and the magician Adam Lesage. She was, once again, a French fortune teller, commissioned poisoner, I'm going to emphasize that, and a professional provider of alleged sorcery. She was the head of a network in Paris of witches. So that's how she provided all those poisons, aphrodisiacs, magical services, black masses. She had like a whole network going for her. Her organization of commissioned black magic and poison killings was suspected to have killed over 1,000 people, but it's actually believed that around 2,500 people might have met their ends because of her. Yikes! Oh, and by the way, she was a central figure in the famous Affaire de Poison, in case you didn't know. And because I'm in a fun mood today, let's end this with another male wit. Folks really don't like to talk about that in textbooks, but they did exist. So Jacques Garnier was a reclusive loner living in the woods around Dole Freya. Despite being a solitary man, he did marry in 1572. Now, historians have reported that Gilles was ill-equipped to provide for his family because he wasn't a really good hunter, since he only really was known to hunt for himself. So that's when he started hunting something else. Anybody want to guess what? Come on. Yeah, human flesh. The first hunt happened around September 29th of 1572 when Garnier killed a young female, allegedly while in the form of a wolf, and brought some of the flesh home for his wife to eat. How thoughtful. Throughout the autumn, more young humans were found unalived and mutilated, including another young woman that Garnier bit and clawed at, but was interrupted by passerbys before fleeing. Sadly, the girl succumbed to her injuries a few days later. Now in November, Garnier ended the life of a young man this time, enjoying the flesh from his thighs and belly before tearing off a leg to save for later. I could name more, but I'm feeling a little queasy as it is. Now this caused a stir amongst the townspeople, who believed that it was a werewolf who was committing the horrors. Many folks had witnessed a humanoid-looking wolf near the scenes of the crimes, with the animal darting off once it was aware of being seen. Then in January of 1573, there was one last death. This time villagers heard a young person screaming and the sounds of a wolf, witnessing the wolf attempt to flee the scene, but changing into the form of Garnier as it did. He was then arrested, put on the rack, and confessed to killing the young and consuming their flesh. At his trial, more than 50 people testified, and he was found guilty of lycanthropy, you know, the ability to turn into an animal, and witchcraft. He and his wife were burned at the stake on January 8th of 1573. A witch and werewolf hybrid? Sounds a little too scary for my liking. Unless I'm watching Vampire Diaries, which in that case, Team Damon. Maybe I should do that tonight.
Starting off this countdown, we have Alice Goodridge. In 1597, Alice Goodridge was tried after it was discovered she had 2 small bloody holes on her stomach. It looked like she had cut the witch's mark out of her skin. They were described as great warts that appeared to have been sucked. They believed that the devil would create these marks on their body after sucking the witch's blood from them as a form of nourishment. Not only that, but Alice apparently had a mark behind her arm and a number of other marks towards the top of her shoulder. But Alice claimed that the wound on her stomach happened after she accidentally stabbed herself. So the officials got a doctor to look at her stomach wound to see if it was the witch's mark or an accidental stab wound. Well, the doctor said, and I quote, "was like to ha been so a long time, for it was not festered and seemed to be sucken." AKA it was not a new wound like she claimed it was, and it appeared as if someone was sucking on the wound, AKA the devil or demons. So poor Alice was tried as a witch. Now how was she accused in the first place? Well, according to some articles I read from the archives, a young boy named Thomas Darling came forward claiming that he had been bewitched by Alice. How darling, get it? He became super ill and would have weird fits. Also, according to the boy, Alice sent her familiar Minnie to torment him. So that's why Alice was questioned and strip searched for a witch's mark. When they found several all over her body, she was killed. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really helps us out. Moving on to number 4, we have Isabelle Adams. In 1707, during the witchcraft trials in Scotland, a woman named Isabelle Adams confessed that the devil had given her a mark. She claimed that in the fall she encountered a man with a hat wearing all black clothes. She engaged with the man and it turned out he was the devil and ended up kissing her. He then told her that in his service she could be as rich as she wanted to. So she decided to renounce her baptism and make a pact with the devil. Upon doing so, that's when she received the witch's mark or devil's mark. And surprisingly, after confessing this all, she wasn't even killed. She was actually freed, she just had to pay a fine. Moving on, number 3, we have Elizabeth Jackson. The trial of Elizabeth Jackson was a pretty complex one. It seemed as if she was just an innocent woman whose neighbors wanted to get rid of her. So they created this elaborate story that she was a witch. So this took place in the mid-1600s. Elizabeth Jackson, or Elizabeth Howe, was accused of bewitching a 14-year-old girl named Mary Glover. At her trial, a woman named Elizabeth Burgess came forward being like, "Yeah, I witnessed her bewitch this poor young girl." Then she also claimed that she was visited by Jackson herself. During the visit, she was eating prunes when she wasn't able to swallow them and then she threw up. So she believed that this was the result of Jackson putting a spell on her. She then went on saying that every time Jackson visited her, bad things would happen. One time she even claimed that Jackson put a spell on her. She said, and I quote, "that she might cast up her heart, guts and all," adding, "thou shortly shall have in thee an evil spirit too." The following night, Burgess claimed she was visited by a vision in the shape of a fox. The night after, she had a vision of like a scary shadow man. The third night, she was visited by another vision, just like Jackson promised in her curse. Then another child, Hannah Trumbull, started having weird fits and became ill. She claimed it felt like she was being pricked by pins and said it was the work of Elizabeth Jackson. A priest was eventually called to help Hannah, and while he was there, Hannah screamed out saying that Elizabeth was in the same room as them too, and that she was going in and out of the oven. No clue what that means, but everyone was like, so she's guilty, she's a witch. So there was a lot of evidence built up against Elizabeth. During her trial, she was searched and they apparently found marks all over her body. An article said, and I quote, "Under the hands of the woman, marks were found in diverse places of her body. These marks were determined to be unlikely to grow of any disease, but rather more like the marks which are described to be in witches' bodies." On July 19, 1692, she was executed by hanging. Dude, Old English is messed up. In our second spot today, we have Marie Lamont. In 1662, Marie Lamont was tried and confessed to being a witch. So this all went down during the reign of Charles II, just after the whole big witch craze that happened in the UK. Now, her case was unusual for one main reason. She was only 13 years old. But apparently she renounced her Christian faith and then got baptized by the devil. She even went on to confess to having intimate relations with the devil on multiple occasions. Apparently her and a number of other witches would meet up at night and would mingle with the devil. The devil would appear to them as a shape of a dark man with hooved feet. Other times he would appear as a brown dog. The group would then throw stones into the sea with the intention of hitting and sinking ships, all at the command of the devil. At her trial in 1662, she was accused of shape-shifting into a cat and using her magic to steal milk. This included placing a mug under the cow's udders and saying, "In God's name, God send us milk. God send it, and lots of it." And apparently it worked. I don't know. Furthermore, when she was searched at her trial, they found a mark on the right side of her body. Marie claims that this was from the devil nipping at her. Due to all the evidence stacked up against her, she was found guilty and burned at the stake. And in our number one spot today, we have Annabelle Stewart. Annabelle Stewart was tried in 1678 Scotland after being accused of being a witch. But they didn't have much against her. Apparently, she was taught witchcraft by a local beggar, Catherine McTarget. Now, they thought she was a witch because she was a beggar and was greedy. When people would give her money, she would demand more. If people didn't give her money, she would threaten them and tell them that bad things were coming their way. Plus, when people did call her a witch, she never denied it. She just kind of went with the flow. So people thought she was one. Now, back to Annabelle. So they thought that Catherine was her teacher of witchcraft and then she was imprisoned. During her trial, it was revealed that she had a mark on her arm. She confessed that she received that mark from the devil. She was found guilty and she was going to be executed, but she was underage. So instead, they decided to fix her instead of kill her. They moved her to Glasgow and was looked after by ministers. There she would pray with them daily and follow their spiritual practices. Starting off this countdown, we have John Reed. John Reed was one of the 7 witches tried in 1697 Scotland. When he was caught, persecutors found that he had a mark on his loin. John said that the devil had nipped him there and that it indeed was a witch's mark. John also confessed that he was in service with the devil. The devil promised him wealth and abundance, but in return, John belonged to the devil. But John revealed that the devil broke his promise and never did anything he said he was going to do. On top of that, John admitted to attending a number of meetings with other witches. He also admitted that he was responsible for the torment of Christian Shaw. Christian was an 11-year-old who claimed she encountered a pack of witches who then bullied her and stole her milk. He also admitted that they all drowned her in the local well. As a result of his confession, it was very clear that he was a witch and he was locked away in a cell. The next day though, he was found dead. He had hung himself in his cell with his own scarf. It was believed that this was the devil's work. The devil convinced him to take his own life because John exposed him. Within the following weeks, the other witches close to John took their own lives in their cell as well. Again, it's thought that the devil possessed them and killed them off one by one because he was pissed with them. In our fourth spot, we have Janet Howt. Between 1661 to 1663, 44 people in Beaufort, Scotland were accused of witchcraft. 7 of those accused were executed. The fate of some of the others remain unclear. One of the main women was Helen Guthrie. She was not a nice lady at all. This woman murdered her own stepsister and the stepsister's children. But she was like, wait, I'll help you, and claimed that she was able to identify other witches just by looking at them. So she said she would help them in the witch hunt hunt if they went easy on her. She then went on to make up elaborate stories of witches meeting up at graves and eating the flesh of other humans, etc. The more she made up and pointed fingers, the longer she got to live, and same with her daughter Janet Howt. Janet was also accused of being a witch like her mom. In fact, she had a witch's mark on her shoulder. She said it was from the devil biting it. She also said that it hurt for so long until the devil visited her again and stroked her shoulder. When he did that, the pain immediately stopped. Now, Janet was imprisoned with the rest of the accused, but we don't know what happened to her. They held a trial for her and no one testified against her. Plus, they only had the mark on her shoulder as evidence. We truly don't know if young Janet was let go or sadly killed. What we do know is that her plea date was 1666, 4 years after her arrest, so she was in jail for quite some time. In our third spot, we have the Witches of Huntington. The Witches of Huntington were several individuals in the UK who were found guilty of witchcraft. First, we have Elizabeth Weed. Apparently one night, 3 spirits came to her and told her to renounce God and make a blood pact with the devil. So she listened, and that's what she did. John Winnick also did the same, but only agreed to if the spirits would help him out financially. Others, including John Clark Jr., were also visited by these spirits and decided to also renounce God and make a deal with the devil. Out of the 9 people accused, 5 were found guilty and hanged. Well, John Clark knew that they were going to search everyone's body for their witch's mark, which they all had. So what did he do? He cut off his 3 days before he was searched. Literally gouged it out of his skin so that the mark was gone. But I'm kind of confused because wouldn't that create another mark? I don't know, but I think he was let off the hook while he watched his friends be killed. He literally said, and I quote, "It was foolish to let the authorities find their marks. I cut off mine 3 days before I was searched." He then denied ever making a pact with the devil or being a witch, even though he was. Moving on to number 2, we have George Jacobs Sr. George Jacobs Sr. was an English colonist who was accused of witchcraft in 1692 during the Salem Witch Trials. George was quite the man around town. He had several run-ins with the law. He was known for having a violent temper, and in 1677 hit a man named John Tompkins Jr. 2 witnesses said, and I quote, "One blow, and if the latter had not held him by the arms, he would have struck him some more, he being in such a passion." Now, he was fined for this. Then in 1674 he was sued by his neighbor after he chased some of his horses into the river where they drowned. He argued that the horses were trespassing on his property, whereas others thought he just liked wreaking havoc on town. Fast forward several years later, George Jacobs Sr. and his son, George Jacobs Jr., and his daughter-in-law and granddaughter were all accused of witchcraft. Everyone got off except for Jacobs Sr., and that's because he had a witch's mark. His body was searched and they found what was described as 3 teats on Jacobs. It was thought that if a person had an extra nipple, that this was a sign that they were a witch. Why? Well, it was believed that the extra nipple or teat was from when the devil or some demons sucked the witch's blood as a form of nourishment. It was said that Jacob Sr. had 3 of them. 1 in his mouth, 1 on his right shoulder blade, and 1 on his hip. Now, they weren't actually nipples though, it was just a 1/4 inch long fleshy thing protruding from his skin with a sharp point. They proceeded to stick pins in each of them to see what would happen. This was called the witch pricker. Apparently, if you are pricked and you don't have a reaction to getting pricked and you don't bleed, then you are a witch. Well, when they pricked each teat, Jacobs never reacted to it and he didn't even bleed. So he was found guilty on August 5th, 1692 and was sentenced to be hanged along with the other witches. And in our number 1 spot we have Elspeth Rioch. Elspeth Rioch was an alleged witch in Scotland during the early 1600s. When she was 12 years old, she claimed that she was approached by 2 men. One was dressed in all black, the other in green tartan. The man in green told her that if she followed his instructions, that she would be able to obtain magical powers. He told her to boil an egg and use the condensation from cooking the egg and take it and rub it on her eyes with unwashed hands. Sounds like an eye infection to me. He said that this would give her the powers to see and know everything that she wanted. So she followed his instructions and bam, it actually worked. So now I kind of want to go home and try it. I don't know, maybe it will work. And she actually developed clairvoyant skills. When Elspeth was older, she was visited again by the men. This time it was only the man in black. He showed up in her room one night. He told her that he was neither dead nor alive, but trapped between heaven and earth. He also told her that to maintain her magic skills, she needed to act dumb. That way, no one would suspect a thing. They'd be like, she's not a witch, no, she's way too dumb to be one. Well, eventually she was caught. In fact, she got in way more trouble because of her acting dumb. They were all like, she's fully a witch, she tried to trick us, let's kill her. At her trial in March of 1616, she confessed to using her clairvoyant powers to spy on people, and she would also use magical spells to cure illnesses. Furthermore, when they inspected her body, they found a witch's mark. She had what appeared to be a scar in the shape of bite marks on her shoulder. Later, she confessed that she was bit by the devil, and that was the mark that he left. She was charged with witchcraft and deceiving locals by pretending she was mute. In the end, she was executed by strangulation before having her body burned.
Kicking us off in 5th place, we have Tituba, one of the first women to be accused of witchcraft during the Salem Witch Trials of 1692 to 93. It is believed that she was taken from her tribe and forced into slavery in Barbados, where she learned her skills in witchcraft from mistresses and other slaves. When the head of her plantation passed, she was inherited by Minister Samuel Parris and was then brought to Salem, Massachusetts. Tituba was accused of practicing witchcraft by a young woman, Abigail Williams and Elizabeth Parris, who also happened to be the daughter of her owner. The girls had been showing signs of being bewitched, and it was believed that Tituba told the girls tales of voodoo and witchcraft prior to said accusations. A neighbor of the Parris family, Mary Sibley, recommended a witch's cake be baked to reveal the names of the witches, and instructed Tituba to bake a rye cake with the victim's urine and feed the cake to a dog. Dogs were believed to support witches and their supernatural powers by following the witch's requests. When the symptoms shown by the young woman did not pass, this was shown as evidence that Tituba possessed the powers of witchcraft. She was allowed to speak in court, becoming the first person to confess to practicing witchcraft in Salem in March of 1962. She also confessed to speaking with the devil, stating that he ordered her to worship him and hurt the children of the village, along with discussing tales of black dogs, hogs, a yellow bird, red and black rats, cats, a fox, and a wolf that she had cursed. She was sent to jail in Boston to await trial and punishment on March 7, eventually stuck in jail until being sold to an unknown person for the price of her jail fees that Samuel had refused to pay. Coming in 4th, Molde Dyer, one of the witches that inspired the Blair Witch Project. Residing in Leonardtown, Maryland, her origins are clouded in mystery, the most popular theory being that she was a noblewoman escaping an unsavory past. Taking up an isolated residence outside of town limits, she developed a reputation as a skilled herbalist. Those skills, combined with her unknown past and secluded lifestyle, planted the suspicion of witchcraft in villagers' heads. In the winter of 1697, the weather was so harsh that many crops failed, and a deadly plague swept through the town. It is believed that these were revenge from Molde, after the townspeople had been blaming her for every misfortune and hardship they faced. A meeting was held amongst town vigilantes, and they decided to form a mob to run her out of town. They set fire to her cottage in the dark of night, and Molde ran until her legs gave out, kneeling by a large rock. She raised her hand to the sky, calling down a further curse to the townspeople, and eventually froze to that same rock, leaving her handprint as a notice of her final act. The boulder has since been preserved as a landmark, and even though the handprint is no longer clearly visible, visitors have reported feeling profoundly uncomfortable or experiencing terrible aches and pains around it, and cameras have been known to malfunction in its presence. On the coldest nights of the year, people have reported seeing a woman with long white hair and wearing a white dress walking through the fields and woods near the town. 3rd place, Sherwood, the last convicted witch of Virginia. Also known as the Witch of Pungo, she was born in 1660 to carpenter John White and his wife Susan, and married her husband, farmer James Sherwood, in 1680, whom she birthed 3 sons with. Grace was a renowned healer, growing her own herbs on their land, also acting as a midwife. While no official paintings or drawings of her exist, she is described as very attractive and tall, with a sense of humor. She was known to wear trousers instead of dresses while doing yard work, something almost unheard of at the time. The first accusation of wrongdoing against her came in 1697, when Richard Capps accused her of using a spell to end the life of his bull, of which the court could not make a decision. Grace and her husband filed a countersuit, which was settled out of court. In 1698, Grace was then accused by neighbor John Gisborne of enchanting his pigs and cotton crop. No court action was taken this time, and another countersuit by the Sherwoods went nowhere. In that same year, Elizabeth Barnes alleged that Grace had taken the form of a black cat, entered the Barnes' home, jumped over her bed, whipped her, and left through the keyhole. The allegations went nowhere. Same for the countersuit, leaving the Sherwood couple to pay court fees for the third time. After her husband's death in 1701, Grace managed to dodge further allegations until 1705, when she got into a fight with neighbor Elizabeth Hill. She sued Elizabeth and her husband for a battery and was awarded damages of 20 shillings, so roughly the equivalent to 170 Canadian dollars today. In March, the Princess and County Justices assembled 2 juries, both made up of women, with the first being ordered to search Elizabeth's home for wax or baked items that might indicate she was a witch. Led by Elizabeth Hill herself, Grace was examined by the second jury of 12 ancient and knowing women, appointed to look for markings on her body that might be brands of the devil. And they discovered 2 marks not like theirs or like those of any other woman known to them. On July 5th, the justices ordered a trial by ducking to take place. If Grace were to sink, she would be deemed innocent. If she were to float and survive, she would be declared as guilty and imprisoned. Around 10 a.m. on July 10th, she was taken down a dirt lane now known as Witch Duck Road to a plantation near the mouth of the Lynn Haven River. The event attracted people from all over the colony, who began to shout, "Duck the witch!" It is believed that her right thumb was bound to her left big toe and her left thumb to her right big toe, and then she was flung into the water, where she quickly floated to the surface. The sheriff then tied a 13-pound Bible around her neck, causing her to sink, but she untied herself and returned to the surface, cementing her status as a witch. She was then imprisoned for 8 years and lived quietly until her death in 1740. According to legend, her sons placed her body near the fireplace, and a wind came down the chimney, with her corpse disappearing amongst the embers. The only clue left behind was a cloven hoofprint. Stories about the devil taking her body, unnatural storms, and loitering black cats quickly arose after her death, and local men ended the life of every feline they could find. This widespread elimination of cats is believed to have caused the infestation of rats and mice in 1743. In our second place position, we're traveling over to 1662 Scotland, where Isabelle Gowdy, housewife to John Gilbert, residents of the Aldern region, and that's about all we know of her personal life. It is believed that she was tortured before her confession. Methods used at the time included the use of thumb screws, foot roasting, witch pricking to test for a devil's mark, sleep deprivation, or isolation with food and water restrictions. Ugh. The specific details of the original accusation or reason for her confession are unknown, but are believed to be part of a conspiracy to torment the local minister, Harry Forbes, who was a zealous extremist who had a fear of witchcraft. And for a woman who would not have been taught to read or write, she was extremely eloquent. Her first confession described an encounter with the devil in the church at night, where she renounced her baptism and the devil put his mark on her shoulder before sucking her blood from it. Other meetings took place at several locations, where she recounted having sexual intercourse with the devil, who she described as a very cold and rough but great man. She detailed his appearance as having forked and cloven feet that were sometimes covered with shoes or boots. Details were given of taking a child's body from a grave and spoiling crops, along with information about covens and where they danced. The coven ate and drank the best of food at houses they reached by flying through the air on magical horses and entered through the windows, where they were entertained by the Queen of the Fairies in her home at Downey Hill, which was filled with water bowls that frightened Isabelle. She claimed to have made clay figures of the male offspring of the owner of her land to cause them suffering or death, and that she had assumed the form of a jackdaw bird with other members of the coven who had transformed into animals like cats and hares. Some parts of her testimony, such as her description of the king and queen of the fairies, has been cut short when the notaries have just noted, etc., because they were unable to keep pace with the volume of information being narrated to them. A little over 2 weeks later, on May 3rd, Isabelle's second confession was transcribed. She expanded on details about the coven by providing the nicknames of its members and as many of the spirits that waited on them as she could remember, including her own servant spirit, whom she called Red River, who dressed all in black. Claims included once again having the ability to transform into animals, with the individual chance used supplied. Over the duration of all of her confessions, a total of 27 benevolent or malevolent chants were given, more than in any other British witchcraft case. She testified that the devil handmade elf arrows that were then enhanced by small, roughly spoken elf boys. The devil allocated a number of arrows to each coven member with instructions that they were to be fired in his name. If the intended target human or animal, was touched by the arrow, she claimed that they would pass, even if wearing protective armor. Spells used to inflict illness and torment on local minister Harry Forbes were also described. On May 15th, Isabelle was brought before her interrogators for a third time. Same as her first two confessions, the transcript begins by detailing her pact with the devil. Taking the information she provided previously about the elf arrows a step further, she revealed the names of those whose lives she had ended, along with supplying names of other coven members with details of who they had unalived. She described an instance where the devil had sent her to run an errand disguised as a hare, and how, while in that form, she was chased by a pack of dogs until she was able to utter the chant to transform herself back into a human. She mentioned that while dogs could not kill her in that disguise, any marks sustained would still show after returning to human form. Descriptions of dining with the devil, along with salacious details concerning sexual relations with said devil, and broad characteristics of his were chronicled. The fourth and final confession on May 27th was mainly to confirm the three previous testimonies and an attempt to elicit more information about the members of the coven. After the 6 weeks that it took to record her testimonies, the panel of interrogators believed they had enough proof to request a trial from the Privy Council, which was granted. While there is no official record of the exact trial outcome, it is believed that Isabelle would have been found guilty and, following the verdict, would have been transported by cart to Gallows Hill, where she would have been subject to a public strangulation and burning. The posthumous burning to ensure that she couldn't haunt the community from beyond her grave. Granted, locals to the area claim that she is the Green Lady that can be seen haunting them to this day. Finally, in first place, we have the only male witch on this list, Grigory Rasputin. Close family friend of the last royal Russian family, he was originally introduced to them as a faith healer who could aid their only son, Alexei, who suffered from hemophilia. A self-described mystic and holy man, he was a figure of much debate amongst the royal court, with some describing him as a visionary and prophet, others as a charlatan and scam artist. Historians believe that his scandalous reputation and influence over the Romanovs helped to discredit and overthrow the family. Having taken many pilgrimages to holy monasteries, he developed a reputation as a reverent holy man, gaining a small circle of followers who believed in his miracles, and began leading private prayer meetings, much to the scorn and suspicion of villagers and priests. It was rumored that female followers were ceremonially washing him before each meeting, that the group sang strange songs, and even that they had joined a religious sect whose rituals were rumored to include self-flagellation and sexual orgies. Word of Rasputin's activity and charisma began to spread in Siberia during the early 1900s, where he developed many friendships with high-ranking religious leaders, eventually leading to his introduction to the royal family. It's not certain when Rasputin first acted as Alexei's healer, with the earliest record on date being when he was summoned by Alexandra to pray for Alexei when he had an internal hemorrhage in the spring of 1907, with the young royal healing by the next morning. Due to his closeness with the family, Rasputin was allowed intimate access in situations that governesses to the children described as inappropriate. One governess in particular was released from her position simply for voicing her concerns about Rasputin being allowed around the children while they were clad in nothing but their nightgown. Another of the nursery governesses claimed in the spring of 1910 that she was seduced into sexual acts against her will by Rasputin, having originally been a devotee of him but was later disillusioned. The empress refused to believe her and said that everything Rasputin does is holy, later dismissing the governess. It was whispered in society that Rasputin had seduced not only the Tsarina, but also the 4 young Grand Duchesses. Rasputin had released passionate letters written to him by the Tsarina and the 4 young Grand Duchesses that, throughout society, fueled the rumors. In 1916, a group of nobles led by Prince Felix Yusupov banded together, deciding to assassinate the holy man for his influence over Alexandria and her family. It is said that the prince invited Rasputin to his place shortly after midnight, where he offered the man tea and cakes, which had been laced with cyanide. Rasputin initially refused the cakes, but then began to eat them, and to Felix's surprise, appeared unaffected by the poison. Rasputin then asked for wine, which had also been poisoned, and drank 3 glasses, but still showed no sign of distress. At around 2:30 in the morning, Felix excused himself to go upstairs, where his fellow conspirators were waiting. He grabbed a revolver and returned to the basement, telling Rasputin that he'd better look at the crucifix and say a prayer, referring to the crucifix in the room, and then shot him once in the chest. Rasputin leapt up from the bullet and attacked Felix, who freed himself with some effort and fled upstairs. Rasputin then followed Felix outdoors, where he was shot once again and collapsed into a snowbank. The group of men then wrapped his body in cloth, drove it to the Petrovsky Bridge, and dropped it into the Malaya Nevka River.